Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Seeley, Vice President here at the Middle East Institute. Thank you all so much for joining us. If there is anybody in the back in the overflow room, we have about 4 or 5 seats here in the Boardman room. So please make your way on in. This is a very special occasion, and it's in the midst of all the unrest in the Middle East. I find it very fitting that we're here today to shine a spotlight on media coverage of the Arab and Muslim world. Roger and I had programmed this talk long before the unrest in Tunisia and Egypt, and at the time, Roger had proposed doing a talk about media coverage of Islam and how so often the Western media get it wrong, the implications of this poor coverage, and a solution to it if there is one. But then we decided to rejigger our talk given what has just unfolded in Tunisia and in Egypt and what seems to be unfolding in Bahrain, because the media has played such an important role in covering the events in Tahrir Square. And we decided to look not just at Islam, but at media coverage of Egypt, and to talk not just about how the media have gotten it wrong, but how they occasionally get it right. Because really, I think the coverage that has been coming out of the region has been quite impressive, and I say that as a journalist who covered the area for 9 years for NPR and PBS. I don't think I've ever seen such consistent coverage of positive voices and a positive message from the region. And that's not because those voices and that message did not exist. They have been there for years. I've covered these very same voices demanding the very same things for the last 9 years, but of course editors have just not been interested. The focus has always been on the U.S. role in Iraq or U.S. concerns vis-a-vis Israeli national security. And so it's really been a treat to hear Arab voices for the very first time and to realize there is no such thing as the Arab street anymore. We have voices from Egypt and voices from Tunisia and now voices from Bahrain. So everything that's been going on segues very nicely into what we're going to talk about today. Roger will look mainly at media coverage of Islam, and I agree with him. He will, of course, spell it out in great detail, but I agree with him that the media have generally gotten it wrong. Our coverage of Islam has been very negative. I think it's fair to say that, Islam equals terrorist in the American media, which is why it's been so curious to see how MSNBC and CNN and the Post have been covering the debate over Al-Qaeda and the difference between Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and the piety movement. They're suddenly recognizing that there are gradations of Islam. There are different Muslim groups and different ways of interpreting Islam. So that's all very unprecedented and very exciting. And we'll be getting into all of that today with 2 very excellent journalists who've been covering both Islam and the Middle East for a very long time. For those of you like myself who have long listened to the BBC, Roger Hardy's voice is a very familiar one. He was the BBC World Service's Middle East and Islamic Affairs analyst from 1986 to 2010, spent some 25 years covering the region, and he turned some of his travels and experiences into a book, The Muslim Revolt, A Journey Through Political Islam, recently published by Columbia University Press. Roger will put some flyers out a little bit later. I gather if you click onto one of these links here, you'll get a 30% discount on his book. So please do that. We support the sale of all of the books of our scholars and of our speakers. Today, Roger is a scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and we've snatched him just before he returns to London, is it? So welcome, Roger. He'll be presenting his position, and then Barbara Slavin will be responding with her analysis and insight. Barbara also needs a little introduction in this town. A journalist, she's known for her in-depth coverage of the Middle East, first as a senior diplomatic reporter for USA Today, where she covered key issues like the U.S.-led war on terror, the war on Iraq, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And later she worked as the assistant managing editor for World and National Security at the Washington Times. She is the author of a 2007 book on Iran called Bitter Friends, Bosom Enemies, Iran, the U.S., and the Twisted Path to Confrontation, a very relevant book. Currently, Barbara is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council South Asia Center. Thank you both so much for joining us. Before we begin, though, very quickly, just a few notes. Tomorrow we have another talk. It's been a busy week at MEI. We're talking tomorrow about the Egyptian military, looking at the structure, the leadership, and their role in Egyptian society, and trying to understand how they're going to handle this transitional period. And then next week, Wednesday, February 23rd, we're talking about the challenges and opportunities for a Palestinian-Israeli peace in the midst of this crisis, with Yoram Perry, a former advisor to Yitzhak Rabin, and former Congressman Robert Wexler. So I hope you all can join us for those talks. So let us now begin. We're going to start with Roger, who will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then Barbara will add her comments. So please join me in welcoming Roger Hawdy.
Thank you, Kate. For those of you who know Kate and her work at MEI, Kate is a force of nature. I'm only going to plug the book once, but I'm going to do it now. But if you want to pass some of those around, please do. But it's very easy to get this really rather generous 30% discount, which we've agreed to give you coming to this event. It's great to be here. It's great to be here in a whole number of senses. It's great to be in a town that I love and I've got to know much better over the last 6 months. It's great to be at the Wilson Center, I think one of the finest think tanks in a town that is rich in think tanks. I'm happy to be here, even though I'm not the biggest fan of your foreign policy in the Greater Middle East. I'm happy to be here despite the fact that I've given myself, I can't blame anybody else for this, the task of attacking my own side. To use the language of the Middle East, I'm standing here to attack my own tribe, a dangerous thing to do in that part of the world. Let me say first, I'm very happy to be a journalist. I have no problem with being a journalist, which is probably a good thing because I don't think I'm fit for anything else. But it does seem to me we're not great at self-criticism. The journalists I know don't, I think, stay awake at night thinking, did we get it right? Nor, I think, do their bosses, and they should. I'm going to present you the case for the prosecution, and there are 3 items on the charge sheet. Only 3 because my time is limited. I'd love to stand here and tell you, and I believe these things are true, that people should have realized by now that the Palestinian issue is at the heart of this problem of radical Islam, is at the heart of the global jihad. I don't have time to argue that case for you, but I think it's true. And some of the best scholars in this town and in Europe now say that. It was not fashionable to say that. I'd love to stand here and tell you that it's a straightforward dereliction of duty that your media and our media in Europe have dropped the Iraq story like it's over. It ain't over. I'd love to extend the list. I'd love to talk to you about things that I feel strongly about, but I'm going to talk to you first about covering Islam. And the first item on the charge sheet is that we journalists, and not just the tabloid fringe, we journalists just don't understand Islam, Muslims, and the Islamic world. 3 somewhat different things: Islam, Muslims, and the Muslim world. One of the things that we don't get, and I've spent a long time learning, maybe 30 years of my life learning, is the incredible diversity of the Muslim world. Diversity politically, culturally, historically, everything. And instead of diversity, we, the media, including the mainstream media, tend to prefer the easy stereotypes to disaggregating a complex and diverse reality.